Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Ward. We got a boatload of fantastic injury news for the Braves. Let's start with the biggest part of it. Kyle Wright is going to start his rehab assignment in Rome. Now, let's talk about realistic possibilities here with Kyle Wright. It's going to take him at least 4 to 5 rehab starts. So we could basically say, let's say that's 20 to 25 days. So the earliest I could see him making it is mid-September, most likely September 20th. It's probably going to be about a month from now. I think you can get 5 starts in a month with him, especially since a lot of his starts are only going to be, 30 pitches, 50 pitches, up to 70 pitches, 90 pitches. But as I talked about with that NLDS rotation, like you really only need 3 starters. I would be shocked unless Kyle Wright just comes out in those last 2 or 3 starts that he has with the Braves and just shoves and he looks like the guy he was last year. I mean, he's going to have to basically beat out Charlie Morton for that start. So a lot of things are going to happen, an injury or something like that. And hopefully that doesn't happen. I think the NLDS is very unlikely, but the NLCS, especially if Bryce Elder doesn't look fantastic down the stretch, by mid-October, if Kyle Wright's healthy and he stays healthy and he feels good, they're going to have simulated games and stuff that are going on behind the scenes while the team's in the playoffs. That's definitely going to happen. He can be fully stretched out. And at that point, it's going to be a judgment call. You're not going to really get to see him against major league action. But if he's out there looking like himself and telling you he feels 100% healthy and you believe him, he could be the 4th guy. He could be the 4th guy, especially if you need him. So I'm interested to see. I think that's realistically, listen, he's going to have a couple starts at the end of the year if there's no setbacks. Any setback he's done for the year. Any setback he's done for the year. Couple starts at the end of the year. Maybe they think about using him in the NLCS. And because how he looked in the World Series a couple years ago, because how he looked against the Phillies when he was just downright dominant against a very good Phillies lineup, possibly the NLCS. I think that's best case scenario.
Yeah. But I just want to talk some Braves fans down a little bit because what you just said was the absolute best case scenario. Like you mentioned at the very end, any setback done for the season. Let's not forget, he dealt with the shoulder injury all offseason, got the cortisone shot, said he's never felt better, and then came out and looked absolutely horrible in a handful of starts. And then they shut him down for, I don't know. So it's kind of, I don't want to say pipe dream by any means because the kid's got talent. He's rested. There is the possibility he returns, but the likelihood cannot. The Braves aren't going into the postseason counting on Kyle Wright, in my opinion. If they do, that's wishful thinking. You got to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And the worst is Kyle Wright is not going to be available. Ideally, he is available, and he's that guy that we saw last year who is just one of the filthiest pitchers in baseball. That's ideal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I put the odds of us seeing Kyle Wright in the playoffs. First of all, we got to make the NLCS, so you got to win the NLDS without him. So I mean, I put the odds at about 10 to 20%. I think a lot of it also depends how the other guys look. I mean, if Charlie Morton and Bryce Elder are pitching fantastically, like they might not even want to risk that. And maybe they do. We'll see. I mean, and it's just going to depend. I mean, dude, it's going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on how those guys look. It's going to depend on Kyle Wright's health. It's going to depend on how he looks. It's going to depend on really trust. It's going to, because a lot of it, I mean, listen, Kyle Wright went out there and he had those 5 bad starts. I don't think he ever felt good in any of them. I think he probably should have been shut down after start 1 or 2. I think he started to feel those things, but he didn't want to be shut down and he knew that thing. So a lot of it, there's got to be a trust between, hey, Kyle, how do you genuinely feel? Like, is that shoulder 100% all the way back? Now, I do think they've taken all the precautions here because there's no reason for him to even be coming back if they thought that there was any pain or anything else. And like, he's been throwing for a while. He's been pitching bullpens. He's been pitching simulated games. He went down to Florida to work. He's going to be this rehab assignment. So unless he's checking all the boxes, they wouldn't even bring him back. So I do think there's something. And listen, Alex Anthopoulos, go back to the trade deadline. What he said about Kyle Wright. He said all the doctors say he can be ready by the time the postseason set. So there are a lot of things where I'm saying, okay, health might not be the biggest issue, but let's see if there's any setbacks because they wouldn't even bring him back if there was even a chance. Listen, Kyle Wright's a future piece of this team for this year, next year, and the year after. Like we can win a World Series without him. I don't think anyone doubts that at all. We definitely don't need him. So they would not be bringing him back if they thought health was a concern at this point in his rehab. So clearly they think he's healthy enough to give this a go. So I think that box is checked. But like I said, the other boxes have to be checked. He has to look good in these starts. And then other guys like Bryce Elder and Charlie Morton or whatever might have to like slump a little, because so far they've been very good. I know people want to act like they haven't, but there's only one rotation with 4 guys that have sub 4 ERAs, and it's us. It's the Atlanta Braves. So those guys have actually been really good. And Charlie Morton was fantastic, and Bryce Elder was fantastic in his last start. And I think they both get to pitch against the Mets. So they could look really good again.
Yeah, and then the other injury news, Ozzie Albies. This is the thing with Ozzie Albies, and I think everybody could agree with this. It was purely precautionary, the hamstring cramp that probably felt a little, it was probably a very, very slight pulled hamstring. But one thing is absolutely certain, that Snicker said there's not going to be a rehab assignment for Ozzie Albies, and that's because this was all precautionary. If this was the playoffs, Ozzie Albies would be starting. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And it looks like he's returning, and it's clear that maybe the Braves did value the defense of Nicky Lopez over Vaughn Grissom, because last night's game, these were several hard hit balls that like not many second basemen could have gotten to, but they were just on the outreach of Vaughn Grissom, and it just maybe felt like Nicky Lopez or Ozzie Albies could have gotten there. I don't know about Vaughn Grissom in his future, but good news is Ozzie Albies is right around the corner. He'll return in the immediate future.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get into I mean, I do agree with you. I think Nicky Lopez probably makes one of those plays. I mean, none of them were easy. It wasn't like
I don't want to. Yeah.
None of them were easy by any means, but I do agree. I mean, listen, Nicky Lopez probably makes at least one of them. How that affects the game, no idea. Vaughn Grissom did have a hit. So, I mean, listen, I agree. Like the defense thing with Vaughn Grissom, listen, he's not even going to be able to play second base because Ozzie Albies there. But this is a conversation that we don't need to be having today. I think Ozzie Albies will be back on Friday when he's eligible to return in San Francisco. He'll travel with the team. I expect him to be activated. It was definitely precautionary. He could play tomorrow if he needed to. Obviously he's not eligible, but if like he was, he'd probably be in the lineup starting tomorrow. The other guy, Jesse Chavez. Now, I think the most interesting part of this is, a lot of us, we haven't heard a lot of updates about Chavez. He might begin his rehab assignment very soon. I think he's going to throw one more live bullpen. Everything checks out there. He threw one yesterday, throws another one. Everything checks out. He's going to start his rehab assignment. Should be back well before Kyle Wright if everything goes well. The most interesting part, though, is we finally learned why the hell this was taking so dang long. And it's because he had a microfracture in his shin. Originally, x-rays came back negative. There was supposed to be no IL. Next thing you know, he's on the 60-day IL. Haven't heard from him in almost 3 months. Oh, there just happened to be a microfracture in there. It's crazy. It's just another one of those things, because the Braves have probably known this for 8 weeks.
And the beat writers are doing nothing, just sitting on their hands.
They've probably known this for 8 weeks, and somehow it's just coming out now, which in a way is a good thing. And then Jesse Chavez spoke to it. He said it was kind of refreshing because he was wondering why it was taking so long too. Gets a second opinion. He has a microfracture. Now it's going to be much longer of a development. And that is a thing that really shouldn't, once it's healed. I mean, we saw with Orlando Arcia, he had that microfracture in his wrist. Once it's healed, he should be good to go. It's not something that should flare up and stuff like that. So hopefully Chavez can come back. I think that's good news, but all around, this team's going to get healthy. I don't know if we talked about it last week, but Nick Anderson potentially could be back sometime in September. Jesse Chavez, Dylan Lee, it just seemed like it's a matter of time before they activate him. So, I mean, you got 4 critical pieces to this bullpen, our pitching staff, and Wright, Lee, Chavez. I guess that's 3. Oh, and Anderson potentially coming back in September. Will all of them make the roster? Will all of them look the same? We don't know. We just talked about Wright. But this pitching staff's already really dang good. And you got an embarrassment of riches in terms of depth, and it's why they've been able to handle all of these injuries so well. So I'm not envious at all about Alex Anthopoulos and the decisions he has to make coming up, because you might have to leave Jesse Chavez, who's been such a key piece of the team over the last 3 years, off the roster, or Nick Anderson, who was great. So it's going to be interesting. Coming up after the break, the Georgia Bulldogs named Carson Beck their starter. We're going to talk about it.